Hello and welcome to Gaming the Podcast, the show that celebrates video games and the people who make them. My name is John Robertson and I'm joined as ever by Stace Harmon, and this week we are focusing on the opening hour of Demon's Souls. What makes it great, what makes it so memorable, and what makes it work so well. This is the second show we've done that focuses on the opening hour of a specific game, the first being Metal Gear Solid 2, so do go back and check that episode out. So Stace, we've both played the opening hour of Demon's Souls again, and to be clear, we replayed the opening hour of Blue Point's remaster remake of Demon's Souls on PS5. So yeah, what are your thoughts of the opening hour? I suppose actually, what constitutes an hour for you? How far did you get in an hour?
Okay, so yeah, this was going to be the thing I was going to kick off with, because the opening hour, unlike other games where an hour is kind of a distinct point, the opening hour of Demon's Souls or any Souls game is very heavily subjective. It depends how much experience you've got with the game and I guess how good you are at it and how far you can get. So the opening hour for me was starting from the tutorial area, kind of the prison area, and then going through the Nexus, going through to the castle, the Gates of Boletaria, Archstone, and working my way through that. And I reached the point where you see the dragon for the first time. You see it earlier on in a cutscene, but you kind of meet the dragon for the first time on the bridge, and it does what dragons do and breathes fire and immolates everything. So that's a little bit, I don't know, a few minutes, I guess, before the first boss. I didn't get quite as far as that. And I would say that I only got that far in that amount of time because I did play the original Demon's Souls and completed that. And a lot of my experience of that kind of came rushing back as I played the first hour of this. I was surprised by how much of the layer.
The nightmares came rushing back.
In crystal PTSD clarity. Yeah, I was surprised by how much I remembered without remembering it, if that makes sense. Like, there's an enemy around this corner. Don't go up this staircase because there's going to be a trap and all of this sort of stuff. And I know that the first time I played Demon's Souls back in, my goodness, 2009 or whenever I first played it, I wouldn't have got anywhere near that far in an hour. But yeah, for this time around, on kind of the second time of asking, as an experienced player of the Souls games these days, I got to that point with the dragon breathing fire and just getting past that and kind of opening up the first boss bit. Yeah. So how does that compare to where you got in your first hour?
It's interesting. So did you say if you died in yours or not?
I didn't. I did, and that certainly wasn't the case the first time I played. I didn't. I didn't die in my opening hour, which I was kind of surprised by that as well. Actually, that I didn't. These games are meant to be hard, aren't they?
Well, some say that maybe we've just got good. But so I got I cheated a bit. So in about 65, 70 minutes, I defeated the first boss. The second boss, I suppose, the phalanx boss.
Oh yeah,
the one that you unlocked.
But
I died twice in that time, and so I must just play faster.
Yeah. Absolutely, because I think because you'd have had to do that
I went
backtracking.
Back through the start twice, or three times.
Didn't die, and I got that far, and I felt I was playing pretty. I mean, not aggressively, but I wasn't playing. Kind of, I kind of remembered the attacks, or I recognized the attacks having seen them once. Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember the timing window for parrying some of these. Some of them I didn't at all. Some of them I thought I did and then found out quite quickly that I didn't. Particularly the blue knight, like the blue-faced knight people. Yeah. Those enemies, I thought I had those timings down and it turned out I absolutely didn't. But no, I didn't die. Some of that I think is you do get, the game's quite generous in how many items it either gives you in terms of sort of your critical path through that level, or it makes available through just small detours. I had a lot of healing items.
Yeah.
Obviously, you need to be able to use them. It's the game does does many very clever things. But that risk reward of it takes a certain amount of time to use a healing item. It's not an instant thing. There's an animation that goes with it. It actually requires a ingesting of this herb. And you have to be careful where you use that, because otherwise you might open yourself up to further attacks, which is, of course, a very deliberate design choice. And so, but you do end up with a lot of them. So I didn't die
Did you do any of the optional things? Did you? Because I did some of the optional stuff. I went and got a Strava, the guy that you can save.
I did do that. I did do him. Yeah,
I didn't do like the church bit that the Red Knight.
No, I didn't do that either.
Although you can't go in there at that point in the game. Anyway.
I remember well enough the first time I tried to do that because he's just standing. It's again done very well. He's standing there. You can see him. You know, it's not just like you walk around a corner and there he is in front of you. He's at the other end of like a little walkway. You see him and he doesn't move. If you don't do anything, he will just stand there. It will just stand there. And so, you know, and I remember from my early experience of Demon Souls thinking, yeah, sure, I've already beaten the blue ones of these, so I'll take on the red one and getting swiftly kicked up the backside. So no, I didn't take that on. I did go and get some of the stuff from the dragons, the 2 dragons that are perched kind of in their own little area. I kind of went along the cliff edge and you can get some pretty decent items from that bit, some upgrade materials I think you pick up. So yeah, I certainly did some of, I also did a lot of the, there's I think a shortcut that you open up if you go down a stairwell to a certain point, open up a shortcut. I did that as well. So but I died twice on that bit trying to do that shortcut, going down the stairs both times. The guys of the dredgelings with the flaming swords. Yeah, the same little mob of them killed me. Both times. Managed to get all my souls back both times before they did it, but still, yeah. So that's the opening hour was okay. So it was more or less it was the same ish. I think probably for both of us. I think it would be interesting, and it's an experiment that we can't run ourselves, but interesting to see what at the opening hour for somebody that hasn't previously played a Demon Souls or even a Souls game, but. You know, I played it back, years ago. You played it this remake more recently. But for somebody experiencing that for the first time, I imagine an hour doesn't get you very far at all. Or certainly it didn't get me very far the first time I ever played Demon Souls. Again, I think we have talked about, I think you do play games a bit more aggressively, feels like there's a better word than that. But
I think I definitely play more games more aggressively now than I used to when I was younger. I think I used to be much more careful, and now I'm much more give me the strongest weapon in the game, and I will just work out how to use it. Like it might be really slow. Like in Bloodborne, I used the biggest, slowest weapon. Even in Bloodborne, even though Bloodborne is that bit faster, I was just using the biggest, slowest weapon. I was like, I'll just work out how to use it, and I'll just deal with huge damage when I've figured out how to use it, and I will just doggedly just carry on until I've figured it out. I've never liked, even though I used to play a bit more, I've never liked like roguey kind of like with like little rapiers or daggers or anything. That's like my least favorite kind of character. Yeah, I don't see. I'm the same on that bit. I'm not one. I do like to be pretty nimble. I don't like I don't like that whatever the armor is, where you get to a point where it's actively or demonstrably slowing down your rolls. Like that's not a thing that I'm interested in. Horrible, that. I stay the other side of that. But I don't go to the super quick. And some of that is I don't trust myself to be good enough for that to continue to pay off. I know that if that starts going wrong against the boss particularly, I'm probably going to panic and then just die. Yeah. So I need sort of a middle ground. I need some sort of level of protection. So I was the hunter. I chose a hunter who starts with an axe and a shield and a bow. And the axe is, it's a pretty hefty weapon. The animation for that is particularly on when you successfully parry or when you get behind them and you get that little sort of kind of canned animation of doing it. That's quite slow, that for the axe. Which has its own gameplay sort of consequences or things you need to consider. It can have benefits though, because it stops other attacks. Well, it stops you taking damage from other attacks during the animation. Yeah,
if you can pull that off when you're surrounded, it does. Yeah, there's like a.
Although that can work against you, because there are some frames of animation at the end of it or as it stops where you're still not fully in control of your character, but you are open to damage, and that can mess you up.
So it's a trade. So the opening hour for Demon Souls for me, that's kind of that's what it means. Though in this instance, on this particular occasion, that's what it meant for me to get to that point.
So what's your I don't know what your takeaways from the opening hour. I suppose that's why we're here. But and it's not just. I suppose it's not just. I mean, let's concentrate mainly on Demon Souls. But I think it's important to point out that this is the opening hour of a Souls game as well. Opening hour of all Souls games, all Souls-born games, whatever.
Yeah.
So So yeah, it
well,
does some things that are prevalent that continue throughout all the games.
Yeah, and there's an education element here, of course, as there is with any game. There is a tutorial here, the prison section. The tutorial in the sense of here's some messages on the ground from the game, hard baked into the game that tell you that R2 is a heavy attack and R1 is a standard attack, etc. There is a period of play where you are told a bit of information and you take the information on board, and then probably invariably you try that out. You learn how to parry, and then probably the next thing you're going to do on the next enemy that comes around the corner is, I'm going to try and parry this enemy.
Yeah, I nailed that on my. I'll add the bit in the video right now where I nailed the parry first time after getting the message, which I was quite happy about because I didn't use a shield very much when I played through this game properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, I would definitely go the shield route, and I will carry on playing it now because, as I mentioned, I haven't played through this remaster yet. I started it, but I haven't actually done it. So, and I think I will continue with the character that I've got, and they do come with a shield, and that's the thing I enjoy the most about the shield. In a similar way with Bloodborne, is that stagger kind of animation that you get, and then you get to kind of close the distance and go in for a killing blow. So there is a tutorial, which ends with a vanguard demon, which you fight in a very small area. It's very deliberately curated, of course. You fight in a very small area. There's not a lot of room to move
I always
around.
think, why is he hanging out there? It must be so uncomfortable for him. He's basically the width of the room.
He's got, maybe
what a place
maybe he's
to
a
live.
prisoner. Maybe he's maybe there's a sad narrative that he's a prisoner and his sole purpose is to kill heroes or something. But yeah, I went into that fight. It's a fight you're not meant to win. They do this in other games. Certainly in Sekiro, most recently, was what it reminded me of. There's a fight that you do early on in that you're absolutely not meant to win. You're meant to die. I think in that results in your hand being chopped off. But that nonetheless, this being From Software, you can win it. It is winnable. It's not that they don't cheat. They don't make it impossible for you to win. They don't, cheese it. So I went into that fight with the Vanguard demon, kind of pumped up. I was like, okay, I know how to play this game. I remember this. I've got all my energy. I've got plenty of healing items. I'm ready. And inevitably, I went in. I got hit. I didn't even hit the demon once. I got hit once, and I was dead. And that made me chuckle to myself. And so, this is what it's about.
Yeah, you must have got hit with an unlucky attack or the worst attack possible, because I got hit and had enough energy to stay alive and to heal myself back up, and then I got him down to I don't know, just below half, and then he killed me.
I didn't expect to be dead, but there I was. I was knocked down. I was like, okay, I'm going to get up, but no, I had no energy left. So then that was the end of it. And that area for me is not particularly. I don't feel that is particularly informative about what the game is, in the way that you go on to explore the Nexus, and then which is kind of the hub area for anybody that doesn't know. I think, then you go to the castle.
Yeah, I think what that opening tutorial section does, up to and including the Vanguard demon, though, is it teaches you that you're going to die, right? Like you say, you're expected to die on that fight. So it teaches you that dying is not necessarily a bad thing, because it immediately teaches you that dying leads to progress in that instance. And I know dying doesn't directly lead to progress elsewhere in the game. But in a way it does, in the sense that you're encouraged to explore and experiment and take risks to an extent, and act in a way that wouldn't just be typical, path of least resistance, just do whatever's easiest in front of you. I mean, so you can kind of play like that. But I think the game does, through that tutorial and then beyond, it just sets that sort of vision in your mind that, dying actually isn't just the end here. It pushes you on to other things. In that case, you go to the Nexus and the whole game opens up eventually and whatever. So dying is falling forward rather than falling back.
Yeah. And I think I would like to see, though, your souls confiscated at the point that you die on that, because they're not, and I didn't remember that, but you die, that Vanguard demon, and I would imagine it's specifically when you get killed by the Vanguard demon, not if you die during the build up, which I don't know. But if the Vanguard demon kills you, you go to the Nexus and you keep whatever paltry amount of souls you've collected to that point, a couple of hundred maybe. And I think there could have been a thing there that you lose those, and it teaches you that, there's the slight sting of I've lost that. And at that point, you don't know that 200 souls isn't a lot. It sounds like a lot. Yes, absolutely nothing. But yeah, so you keep those as you go through to the Nexus. But that has a certain value, a certain interest. But it's the fact that you are then free. The thing that I enjoy a lot about Demon's Souls, and I'd forgotten a little bit, but it came back to me quite quickly, was the pacing of it and how much you are left to your own devices to explore and to push into the areas that you want to push into. And that includes kind of being able to see an area from a vantage point and thinking, okay, there's a bunch of enemies there. I'm going to go and I'm going to actively choose to go and take that on. Or not, or I'm going to go and look for another way, or maybe I need to take them on, so I'm going to make sure I'm stocked up first. You're given a lot of information through deliberate design, and not the, what might in other games perhaps be a bit of like hammy dialogue with, oh, that looks like a really tough area, I need to prepare. You're not told any of that. You're just, you're shown, not told.
And you're only shown if you look as well.
Yes, it's very much so. Like the information is there in a lot of areas in Demon's Souls. The information is there, and it's up to you to interpret it, to see it in the first place, to determine what to do with it, if anything. So
I think, I mean, some of the reactions, notes that I've written in response to the opening hour kind of agree with that and reflect that. So like, you can go and you can see the dragons for the first time before that dragon comes and burns the bridge. But it's up to you what you do with that. The game isn't going to tell you, oh, that's too hard for you, don't do that right now. It's you can, like, the training rules are off. You can do whatever you want. It's up to you to make your mistakes. It's up to you to learn from your mistakes. It's up to you to try a different route or different tactic next time. So that opening hour it's not as tough as you want to make it, although you can make it tougher if you want on yourself. And I think, interestingly, and I think this is something that's quite pertinent looking at the opening hour as the opening hour of From Software's Souls offering, is that your best friend early on, as long as you're playing online, are the messages that are written all over the ground. Like, they're really, like, in the absence of a real tutorial, your education and learning can come through the eyes of other people, either through the messages or through the deaths that you see other people have taken if you look at the bloodstains. And it's it's a bold approach to have other players' hints be your only real guide through a world that is otherwise beautifully realized, but incredibly lonely and isolating and, incredibly, incredibly dangerous. Your only connection through help is these non-physical messages. Like, these players aren't helping you directly. They're not coming into your game and helping you. So yeah, setting up that sense of isolation with you at the center of it, and everything that you do is by yourself and you're learning these things by yourself. But that little link to the outside world and to other players that have also gone through this horrible situation, I think is quite clever, because it sets the game both on an intimate level in your isolation, but then also on a grand level, not just with the visuals and that, but a grand level in that, oh, I'm one of many going through this horrible thing, almost like you're all traveling through hell together, but it's like your unique hell, but you've got these tiny little windows onto other people's hells, and they're trying to give you hints.
Yeah, and there is some solace in that, I think. And I think it also does a very clever thing of it fosters a sense of community for a game that, particularly originally, and I know that we're talking here about the much more recent remake, but remaster, I should say, particularly originally, the game was incredibly obtuse in the way that it chose to give you information, particularly about things like the world tendency. and what I mean by obtuse, I mean basically it didn't give you information about the world tendency. You had to find that out. That was generally, or certainly the way that I found it out. I think this is true for everybody, but I think certainly the way I found it out was you had to rely on the community to go and look for what that meant. And that meant going outside of the game and looking online to understand how different world tendencies affected the game and character tendencies affected the game. And that, again, is like that little sense of community of here's some messages to help you promotes that idea of there are people out there outside of the game, outside of my individual instance of the game, who have experienced this, who might know more, who I might be able to share information with, or who I can kind of go and find. And it does a good job of fostering that sense of community without actively saying that that's what you need to do. And that's you can certainly play through it without you can play through it offline. There's no, absolutely. You're not punished for doing that. But there is like a lot more stuff that you learn and a lot more layers to the information that you can gather if you go and kind of use the hive mind rather than just trying to figure it out yourself. And that I think starts with those messages. Absolutely. Those very they're very prominent sort of glowing messages that it starts in game, and it leads to other things if you want it to. It leads to other conversations about the game and theorizing and all of that if you want it to.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Because I know someone who, I won't name names, but they're quite strict on the idea that looking outside of the game itself for any information pertaining to the game ruins the game.
Failure.
Yeah. But not necessarily a failure of design, although I think they probably would also probably agree with that. But it's a failure they see it as like a cheap, it's a failure on the player's part in that if you want to find out how to do something in a game or what the lore is, then you should, as the player, go and figure that out rather than just go and, lazily in their mind, go and look it up online. I mean, I think actually this game, or the Souls games in general, other games as well, but these are sort of like the originators of it, or the big successful originators of it. They're purposely designed for you to go and look up stuff. Surely they are. And surely that creates a bigger community. As you said, it creates a sense of community in that there's all these people all going in and combining their minds to put the big picture together. And without that, there's really no reasonable way that any individual would be able to piece everything together or know that they've pieced everything together, know that they've left no stone unturned. But as a group, as a global player base, you can be more certain or more sure that you have left no stone unturned. Well,
I understand that, and I would say I'm kind of giving From Software it's not the benefit of the doubt by any means. It's I'm giving them, I think, credit perhaps based on proven results. A bit like when we spoke about Hideo Kojima a while back and the episode we did on him, that in his games, when things are left ambiguous or when things look a certain way, it invites you to question what they mean or to theorize about what they mean in a way that other games don't. In another game, you might look at something and just be like, that's dumb. But in Kojima games, you might look at something and think, well, okay, that seems a bit dumb, but there must be a reason that's there. And there's a similar thing here with From Software and that idea, that sense of community outside of the game that I believe, and I'm sort of willing to accept this sort of line of reasoning on it, that it is deliberate, that you are meant to do that. But I can see an example, I absolutely can think of examples where if that were how it was set up, that you have to go and find this information outside of the game online, that can definitely look like, and can be in some cases, bad design or lazy design, or like you're cheating, or like, there's definitely a darker side to that. But in this instance with From Software, I believe that it's a deliberate attempt to foster that community that starts with those messages, because they don't need, there's a reason that system is in there. There's a lot of like system generated messages. There's a lot of those hard boiled messages that are there, like in the tutorial that say R2 is a heavy attack. They're not left by other players, of course. But the fact that the community kind of bands together, and then there's the rating system, and you can say whether it's a good message or a bad message, or helpful or not helpful. I think it starts there, and then it invites that going and seeking those. It's almost like, for me, it's almost like going and seeking out those faceless anonymous kind of contributors or those fellow people that have gone through this with you and talking with them and then learning more stuff along the way. And I can see that, yeah, if you have to, I think if it was stuff where if you don't do X, then you're going to miss out a big part of the game. And the only way to do X is to go and find that out online. That's one thing. But the game is complete in and of itself. If you play offline and you never speak to another soul, that wasn't deliberate, about your experience is still complete. You've still had a complete Demon Souls experience. It's not like, oh, you've only seen half the game.
Yeah.
It's just there's more to it if you choose to go and kind of search that information out. So that's, yeah, my take on it is that it's a deliberate thing. I give From Software kind of the credit for that, I guess, rather than viewing it as a negative.
So sort of like based off, well, kind of related to that sense of community. Like despite that, I think the opening of the game, it's quite lonely, and I know I've said that before, but it feels, and it almost feels like quite sad as well, right? Like the game, like the Maiden in Black, the other people in the Nexus, like just the visuals, the music, the whole world seems like it's sort of, I don't know, like weeping, like crying for itself or for whatever, you don't know in the first hour, but
it's not a triumphant hero's story start, is it? It's like you start down. I mean, you start dead. You start downtrodden. You start in soul form. You start, it's not. I don't think it's meant to be happy. I think, yeah, you're right. It is sad. And I think that's,
and I think one of the best things about the opening of the game is that it's both. It's grand, but again, and I said this before, but it's intimate in its sadness, right? Like it's very grand, and the Nexus is really grand and almost like biblical in its proportions, and it's sort of like religious kind of vibe
to it.
And then the Boletaria Castle, when you first see it, is huge and impressive and intricate, and it's like when you're first playing that, and you're seeing all these different walkways. Sometimes I feel like at times it has the potential to feel overwhelming because it's almost like, well, how am I possibly going to explore all of this stuff with all these dangerous enemies? Each enemy can kill me in and of itself if I'm not really careful. How am I possibly going to explore this whole place safely, staying alive? You can't level up in the first hour until you've done the boss. But even with all it doesn't ever feel overwhelming, and that's partly due to the pacing and the way that they like put enemies in front of you in the opening areas. It's quite generous. I was going to say the word generous, but this is hard because it felt generous for me as a veteran player playing it again. It's like, oh, this actually ain't that. It's not that hard. But for new players, obviously it is. But even I think the thing that makes it feel like it's not overwhelming too overwhelming is not only the enemy placements and they're not too savage, but I think it is that sense of, it is like that sadness that the game almost has, and like your character and the people that you talk to have, and Strava, when you meet him, like he's not like, wow, thank you so much for rescuing me. He's like, he's really like dour and serious, and that sadness and that seriousness that all the characters have, and they're not getting ahead of themselves. It kind of, even though in terms of world design and level design and visuals, it's really grand and overwhelming, in like emotion and sensation and vibe that it gives you, it's really like grounded and, not getting ahead of itself. So it never feels, it almost feels not low key, but like kind of down to earth all the time.
Yeah, I think, and the design of the castle, I think, definitely feeds into that. There is like a past glories feel to it.
Yeah, it feels like lived it. It feels like this is a formerly great civilization. It's not great anymore.
Yeah, Mrs. Havisham's, grand house that's sort of, actually you look a bit closer and it's all a bit decrepit and a bit ruined. And I think having you play through in soul form as opposed to like your human when you've got your body form for a large part of that is quite a formative thing, both in terms of narrative and in terms of what it teaches you about the game, because I think it takes it away from making it feel like a hugely negative thing or a lesser state. I mean, you have less health when you're in soul form. But even in that opening area, you can find a ring that reduces the penalty of that. I think by default you have half health if you're in soul form, and that I think makes it maybe 3/4 instead of half, or 66% instead of half. I'm not sure. But it teaches you to play the game. I find it oddly encouraging. It teaches you to kind of believe that you can do it. It's not just a negative thing. It's not just, oh, now I've lost my human form. Oh, now the game's going to be so much harder. I can't do this. The only way really to beat this is to be in my proper whole human form. It makes you go through a certain amount of the game. It makes you beat a boss, and all in soul form. And you're like, okay, I understand that I can do this. I understand that this is almost the default way to play the game. And that has knock-on effects for like the tendency thing that we were talking about, depending on how you want to play it and how much attention you want to pay to that. And if you don't, then that's absolutely fine. If you want to spend your entire time always trying to be in human form and never sort of, viewing it as if you view it as a negative thing when you're in soul form, you can do that. It's not right or wrong. I think the game just does a good job of kind of boosting you up and saying, you've got this. You did a certain amount of this game right at the beginning as your first experience in your lesser form. So if that happens to you again, or when that happens to you again, don't worry about it. You've proven already that you can do this. And I think that's quite a hopeful, and I probably didn't feel like that on the first time of playing it through. But this time when I go back and sort of look at it and look at what that opening hour might be saying about the rest of the game and even the rest of the series, I feel like that's quite a hopeful message, despite the fact that the rest of it is very low key. It's very kind of understated. It's quite melancholic. It's it's, some of the people you speak to are they're survivors of war, basically. There's like this huge apocalypse has happened and they're there and they've lost their family and they're just doing the best that they can. They're just doing this little bit to try and help out.
Yeah, in relation to that, I like the fact that there's very few people that you can interact with as well, like apart from killing them. Because it makes the world feel like it's grounded in a reality that's separate from your presence. Like when you arrive, the enemies aren't all like waiting for you. They are waiting for you, but they're not like lined up in what do you call it, formation, like waiting for your arrival, like defending the castle. Like you just happen to come across them, they just happen to be there. So I guess, what am I trying to say? I mean, like it makes the whole place, even though it does have that kind of low key vibe, it plays into that low key vibe in an interesting way by not having you be like the center of attention of the world. You know, like as you move through it, okay, you get to memorize where all the enemies are and all that stuff. But as you move through it, and until you come to the bosses, like, or maybe the dragons, there's nothing really to suggest that anyone cares that you're even there, apart from the people in the Nexus, like the dredgelings or the blue knights, the blue-eyed knights, or whatever. They couldn't care less. They just see you whenever you come across them. And then they'll react to it, but they're looking for you. They don't see you as any special individual that they need to sort of take a certain shine to or sharpen their weapons for before you arrive. So it makes you're not the hero. You're just a person. You're just another person come to try, to either to try and grab souls or to be a savior. And I think that makes somebody in the Nexus talks about. It's like, here's another one. Like, what are you? What are you here for yourself or for others, kind of thing. Yeah, and I think that makes each area of the game feel more interesting because it doesn't feel like it's pandering to you. Although obviously in its core design, it is as a one-player game. And if you don't do it, if you don't interact with it, then the game is kind of dead. But I don't want to get too, philosophical about it.
That may be the case
in
general.
But it makes it specifically the opening area. And I think Boletaria is, I don't know, is it like the best area in any Souls game? Like it might be. Like I think it is just like oozing with personality.
It's one of the most memorable, I think, for sure.
Like that first vision of it, and it's so tall in front of you, and it's like, whoa, okay, this, like before you've even swung your sword, and I know that you've already played through the tutorial and you might have found that difficult and died, but if you skip the tutorial, which you can you skip the tutorial if you've never played the tutorial before?
I don't know if I was given the option to, but I have previously played, so I don't know. I don't know if you can do that if you've never done it.
But your first vision of the game worlds proper is, just that giant, however many stories that castle is, and then you spend the whole of most of your first hour going all the way to the top, winding all the way to the top, unlocking a shortcut if you want to or if you find it. And then having to go all the way back down again and defeat that boss. On the way down as well, I know it's slightly after where you played to, but on the way back down, after you go past the dragon, burns the bridge, kills most people on it. After that, you then you pull the lever and the gate opens up and the boss is revealed. On the way down, that if you carry on, you can turn back, I think, and go back the way you came. But if you carry on and go down those stairs, you come across the hoplites, those little blobs with the big shield and the spear that cover the first boss. And I know this is quite an obvious thing, and lots of games do it, that they'll put like little mini versions of the bosses or mini versions of here's a move that's similar to what the boss has that's coming up. But I think putting those hoplites, even though the boss itself is quite easy, but we'll come to that. But the hoplites being on the stairs on a narrow little passageway with their shields, and they're just so awkward and horrible. I ended up using a flame flask, a oil flask, whatever they're called, on one of them. And then the second one is actually a bit easier to sort of sneak around and, not sneak around, but, hop around and kill them from behind. And once you get them from behind, they're easy. But that the awkwardness with which you have to tackle those opening hoplites, and then you see like 50 of them surrounding the phalanx. It's like, oh no, what am I going to do here? So it's a clever. Well, it's not clever necessarily, but it's a good piece of foreshadowing for the boss, in that before you've even faced the boss, even though it looks ridiculous and silly, that boss, you see all those hoplites and you're just like, oh God, and you're just dreading it before you've even... Before, I mean,
you've had a little taste of what it is to face one of those, and you just do that kind of mental calculation of, well, that is like that times 20 or 50 or however many of them they are.
Yeah. I mean, it turns out you can use fire on it, and it's, spoiler, you can use fire on it. It's pretty easy to kill. But I remember, and that's what I did. I used fire on it this time. But when I first played that, I died a few times before figuring out that fire was the way to go. I think
that very short but specific passage of, you open the gate, you've got access to the boss now. But even there, I think that the Boletaria Castle does a lot of teaching you stuff, and that's obvious, but it does a lot of, like, you have to go there first. You can't go through another archstone before you've gone and done that bit. And the reason for that is because, despite the fact that you've just done a 15 or 20 minute tutorial, that is the real tutorial. That teaches you so much about the game in terms of, it gives you kind of courtyards to fight in and corridors to fight in. You learn either explicitly, or whether you're paying attention or not is another matter. That's what we touched on earlier, this idea that the game gives you information if you're willing to accept it or even digest it. It shows you that if you're in a corridor and you're swinging a weapon like an axe, you're going to have problems because it's narrow and your weapon's going to glance off the wall. You learn that stuff, and that's important. Like, that's an important thing that the castle teaches you in that environment where they've got control of, you have to pass through this area. This is this isn't necessarily what you're going to learn, but this is the information we're going to present to you, and it's up to you whether you do learn, I guess, whether you take that on board.
Well, in when I played it through last year or whenever it was, when it came out, when it first came out, as a game I got with PS5. And because of the issues with swinging your sword in corridors, I went for the spear because the spear you poke forward. So you very rarely have that kind of problem. So I suppose it taught me, don't use a sword.
Well, and I think it's like the end. There's all the different enemies with their different attacks and different timings. There's the different, like, exploration. It rewards you for exploration, but it doesn't at no point. And this is what I'm building up to with that bit where you open the drawbridge and then you have to make your way down to fight this thing. There's not very many times when you can take anything for granted. Just because you've opened that boss gate, that doesn't mean you can then just fully healed up and ready to go walk through the gate and fight the boss. You have to fight your way down to it, and you can die on your way to the boss. There's a lesson, I think, in assumptions, and just because I've done X, that doesn't mean I'm home free, kind of thing. Just because it looks like I can now face the next challenge.
Yeah, you haven't turned the tap off just because you've pulled that lever.
And there's
the danger's still
you have to still be alert. You can definitely die. I mean, you can fall down that staircase. It's very deliberately done in that way that it's quite narrow, and if you have to try and get around the back of an enemy and you misstep, you can fall down and kill yourself through the the sort of ignoble death of falling down a flight of stairs. So yeah, there's a lot that you're taught during that first hour or so. Or again, a lot of information that you're presented with, and it's up to you to learn from that or not. That I think that's one of the, I really like those kinds of tutorials where you learn through doing, not just through reading that X is to jump and, R2 is to attack, whatever.
Yeah, they're just easier to remember as well. Like
sometimes like
JRPGs,
rather than just read it, right? Like you've actually, I understand now that if I swing this here, then this is going to happen. Or if I need to be, there's more, you learn more through doing than you do through just reading the instructions.
I mean, I love JRPGs. I play them, but I mean, gosh, the way that they do tutorials, so it's just like walls of text, and it's like, God, you expect you to remember all of this? Like,
just put me in front of something and let me use it, and then I'll find out how it works. So for me it was pleasurable going back and playing that first hour of Demon Souls. It has made me want to continue with it, where previously I hadn't got round to playing the remaster yet. So yeah, and I think it is certainly one of the most memorable opening sequences to a Souls game.
I think one of the reasons for that as well, and we are coming to the end, but the Nexus itself, because I think with the tutorial and the learning and the stuff that we've been speaking about, I think the other big thing is, and we touched on this, but it's that sense of place. It has such a strong sense of place to it. I think arguably the most sense of place in the opening hour of any, including Bloodborne, which does it well at start as well.
Yeah,
but the sense of place that it creates here, with Boletaria, with the opening tutorial area, and with the Nexus, like the three locations that you'll get in the first hour, or depending on how fast you play. Like little things in a Nexus, like having you walk up loads of flights of stairs all the time, and there's not just like an easy menu option to like access that bit of the systems, and everyone in there is so like down, and they're speaking in such like hushed tones, almost like reverential to the place, that they don't want to upset the place itself. And like the colours get a giant statue in there, like everything feels old and big, and almost like you're trespassing in it almost, and that sense of like that does a brilliant job of setting up what's to come. Basically, like in that first hour, you've got such a distilled sense of what you're about to be, what you're about to be exploring, what you're about to be thrown up against.
And it sets them up, I think, also to then be able to subvert them all the better, because you're presented with what is effectively a kind of a fantasy trope, like a fairy tale castle. Is you have an understanding of where that exists in the world, or why it exists, or the sense of story around it. And then as you progress through the game, it takes that kind of initial image of a fantasy castle, and then twists it into various other kind of grotesque forms or areas or environments that are made all the more impactful because of their kind of where they sit on the spectrum versus that initial image of that big kind of imposing castle. And that's
I suppose there are a lot of like classic fantasy tropes in Demon Souls: castles, dragons, knights, special swords and rings of power and all this, but it doesn't feel cheesy like ever.
No, well, it just gets weirder from there. I mean, that flying weird mantis lightning things, etc. But it is, it's impactful because it's done well, rather than it doesn't feel like a cliche, because it's done so well.
Yeah. All right, so that's the opening hour of Demon's Souls. So I've played it again recently. I'm not going to go back and play through the whole thing again recently. Not with Elden Ring about to come out, but you,
got a couple of months.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, and I'll keep everybody posted. That does, just as a very quick addendum, which has got nothing to do with Demon's Souls. Although I did call my character Celine because I've been playing Returnal recently. Anybody that was listening to our New Year's gaming resolutions episode last week, I have now platinumed Returnal. So that's the thing I'm going to be talking about more in the future. But that's just a little update there, and I'll keep people posted on how my Demon's Souls playthrough is going, and we can check back in, and you can see if I'm failing miserably. Starting with confidence, I think I'm going to be fine, but yeah, we'll see how quickly that falls apart.
Okay, well, I haven't completed any of my resolutions yet. I have started playing Toem, so I am on the road to playing all the black and white games I can get my hands on. Otherwise, that was our Demon's Souls opening hour episode. A reminder, you can follow us on Twitter. We are at Indie by Design. We're at Indie by Design on all social media platforms, channels. And you can visit indiebydesign.net to take a look and buy the books that we make. Otherwise, thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next time.